whispers through bone.
The desert was a vast and unyielding sea of sand, stretching endlessly beneath an indifferent sun. Kalen walked alone, his footsteps swallowed swiftly by the shifting dunes. The wind carried no songs here, only silence, a silence that wrapped itself around him like a shroud. His lean form was bent slightly against the heat, sun-bleached hair tangled by the breeze, eyes dark pools that reflected both sorrow and hope. He was a bard without a song, a wanderer searching for a purpose in a land where legends slept beneath layers of sand. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the horizon bled into shades of amber and rose, Kalen found himself atop a lonely dune. The sky above spilled stars like spilled ink, vast and mysterious. He settled onto the cool sand, the weight of his lute a familiar comfort in his hands. His fingers moved instinctively over the strings, coaxing a melancholy tune that blended with the whispering winds. The melody was soft, tentative, a lament for a place he couldn't name, a past he barely remembered. Night deepened, and the desert's silence grew profound. Kalen's eyes traced patterns in the stars, seeking answers in constellations that had guided countless travelers before him. Yet, all he found was an echo of loneliness, a yearning that pulled at his soul. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a faint scent of something ancient and forgotten, a fragrance like dust and old bones. Driven by a strange impulse, Kalen rose and began to walk, his bare feet sinking into the cool sand. The wind tugged at his cloak, guiding him toward a low rise where the dunes seemed to gather like silent watchers. There, half buried beneath layers of golden sand, something caught the moonlight, pale and curving, delicate and unervingly familiar. With shaking hands, Kalen brushed away the sand to reveal a flute carved from bone. Its surface was etched with symbols that seemed to pulse faintly, ancient and worn by time, yet alive with a strange energy. The air around it shimmered, as if the desert itself held its breath. As Kalen lifted the flute, a sudden rush of visions assaulted his mind. Flickering images unfolded like a dream, towering figures cloaked in sand and shadow, a storm of melody and power, gods long forgotten, stirring beneath the earth's crust. The sound of a haunting song filled his ears, a melody woven from sorrow and strength, promising both wonder and peril. He staggered back, clutching the flute tightly. The desert wind swirled around him, rising to a whispering chorus. It was as if the sands themselves listened, waiting for the first note to awaken the forgotten. Night deepened further, and Kalen sat once more on the dune, the bone flute resting against his chest. His heart thundered with a mix of fear and awe. What was this instrument? What secrets did it hold? And what song would he dare to play? Above, the stars glimmered, silent witnesses to a moment that would change the course of the desert's endless story. The whispers beneath the dunes had begun, and Kalen was at their center, a solitary bard poised on the edge of a melody that might awaken gods. He closed his eyes, took a breath heavy with the desert's timeless air, and raised the bone flute to his lips. The first note trembled on the wind, fragile, haunting, full of promise and dread. The desert listened. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the endless waves of sand. Kalen sat perched atop a wind-worn dune, the bone flute cradled in his hands as the desert's silence wrapped around him like a cloak. The instrument was cold against his skin, its surface etched with faint, ancient carvings that seemed to pulse softly in the fading light. He lifted it to his lips, hesitating. The desert held its breath. His fingers found the holes, tentative at first, drawing a single trembling note that trembled into the still air. Then another and another, weaving a melody that was both mournful and strangely beautiful. The notes carried on the evening breeze, rippling through the sand, and stirring whispers that seemed to rise from the depths of the desert itself. Kellen's eyes widened as a faint shimmer flickered at the edge of his vision. A translucent figure, barely there, like a reflection on disturbed water. It hovered, silent and sorrowful, before fading into the twilight. The bard's heart quickened. The flute was more than a relic. It was a key unlocking voices long buried beneath the dunes. The following day, Kellen's steps led him to a small village nestled near a cluster of jagged rocks. There, he sought the counsel of old Tarek, a man whose age matched the desert's own ancient bones. The elder's eyes, sharp despite the years, studied the flute with a mixture of reverence and fear. That flute, Tarek began in a voice rough as sandstone, is tied to the gods who once walked these lands. They were not gentle gods, but mighty and wrathful. When they warred, the desert itself wept. Azareth, the shrouded god, was sealed beneath these sands to keep balance. Your flute, it sings with that power. Kalen listened, the weight of the flute's legacy settling heavily on his shoulders. The bard's curiosity was aflame, but with each tale came a shadow of dread. Tarek's stories hinted at dangers that lurked beneath the surface of the desert's beauty-forgotten powers, eager to awaken. As the day wore on, Kalen returned to the solitude of the dunes. The desert seemed different now, alive with unseen eyes and hushed voices. He played the flute again, each note summoning faint echoes whispers that slipped through the sand like ghosts. The melodies teased memories not his own, visions of a war that shook the heavens and cursed the earth. Night fell, and beneath a tapestry of stars, Kellen's flute sang a haunting tune. His mind was flooded with cryptic visions, gods cloaked in shadow, battles that shattered the skies, and the sorrow of a world buried beneath endless sand. The desert held its secrets close, but through the music, Kalen felt the fragile threads of forgotten history, pulling him deeper into a perilous dance with the past. Yet, amid the awe and melancholy, a question lingered in his heart. What price would he pay for awakening these echoes? And what fate awaited the one who dared call upon the gods buried beneath the dunes? The wind shifted, carrying the flute's final note into the vast silence. Kellen's journey had only just begun, and the desert listened, waiting for the melody yet to come. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky smeared with the burning hues of sunset, a vast sea of shifting sands that swallowed the horizon whole. Kalen trudged onward, each step sinking softly into the warm grains, the bone flute tucked carefully beneath his worn cloak. The day's heat lingered stubbornly, the last embers of sun casting long shadows across the dunes. He was alone, as always, yet the desert hummed with a strange vitality tonight, as if the very air whispered secrets meant only for those who dared listen. Ahead, a figure appeared, sharp against the glowing horizon. Kalen paused, squinting to make out the silhouette. A woman, her dark skin radiant beneath the fading light, moving with a purposeful grace. His heart, weighed down by years of solitude, stirred with a faint flicker of curiosity. He approached cautiously, mindful of the desert's capricious nature and the dangers that lurked unseen. "You wander far," she said, voice steady and clear, cutting through the stillness like a desert wind. Her eyes were sharp, scanning him with an intensity that made Kalen instinctively lower his gaze. Few come this deep without purpose. Kalen nodded, hesitant. "I seek answers." The woman studied him for a moment longer before offering a faint smile, but it did not reach her eyes. "I am Mira. I know these sands and their secrets. You carry something with you, an old power, one that should sleep beneath the dunes." He glanced down at the bone flute, its surface etched with faded symbols, cold and fragile against his palm. "It found me." Myra's gaze darkened. "That flute is a key, a melody that wakes what should remain silent. The gods buried here long ago are restless, and their shadows stretch farther than you can see. Despite her caution, Mira did not turn away. Instead, she folded her arms, a clear offer of alliance. I will come with you. The desert is no place for a lone wanderer, especially one who stirs the dead. Together they moved forward, the shifting sands swallowing their footprints, as if the desert sought to erase their passage. The air grew cooler with the approaching night, the sky bleeding from orange to deep indigo. Kellen's fingers brushed the flute's carved surface, and a sudden impulse took hold. He raised it to his lips and breathed a soft, tentative note. The sound was fragile, but carried far, a mournful melody that slipped through the dunes like a whispered prayer. Around them, shadows seemed to waver and shiver, fleeting forms flickering at the edges of vision. Myra's hand tightened on the curved dagger at her belt as she scanned the darkness. They come, she murmured, eyes narrowing. Spirits drawn by your song. Not all mean harm, but none are bound by mortal rules. The desert around them whispered and sighed, alive with unseen watchers. Kalen lowered the flute, his breath uneven. I did not mean to call them. Intent matters little, Mira said. The gods' memory is long, and their wrath longer. As they made camp beneath a cluster of jagged rocks, Kalen played again, softer this time, coaxing gentle notes that seemed to soothe the restless apparitions. Spectral figures danced on the fringe of firelight, translucent shapes that flickered like candle flames, their faces etched with sorrow and ancient grief. Kalen felt their stories pressing against his soul, fragments of a time when gods walked openly among mortals. Mira watched silently, her expression unreadable. You carry a heavy burden, she said finally. This is no mere instrument. It is a bridge between worlds, between past and present. The night deepened, and the desert's breath grew colder. The stars overhead blinked down like distant eyes, indifferent to the fragile lives below. Kellen's melody wove through the darkness, a fragile thread of hope and warning, echoing the desert's silence and secrets. As dawn approached, Myra stood, her gaze fixed on the horizon where shadows gathered like storm clouds. We must move. The flute's song stirs more than spirits. Kalen nodded, heart heavy but resolute. Together, they set out, bound by a fragile trust and the unspoken knowledge that the desert's mysteries were far from spent. The shadows on the horizon lengthened, and the dance of melody and sand continued, a haunting prelude to the trials yet to come. The desert held its breath, waiting. Kellen's journey had always been solitary, a wandering soul adrift amidst endless dunes. Yet in Myra's presence, a new rhythm emerged, one tempered by caution, sharpened by knowledge, and bound by a shared fate. As they pressed onward, the desert's silent watchers trailed them, figures half seen, their forms flickering like mirages, caught between worlds. The stories Mira told were woven with threads of warning and reverence. She spoke of sacred sites hidden beneath the sands, places where the veil between the living and the dead thinned to a fragile whisper. Her lineage marked her as a guardian, sworn to protect these sacred grounds from desecration and the wrath of forgotten gods. Kalen listened, the flute's weight a constant presence at his side. Questions churned in his mind. Could he control this power? Was he destined to become a herald of destruction or a guardian of balance? With each note he played, the desert seemed to respond, the sand shifting beneath their feet, the wind carrying echoes of ancient songs long forgotten. One evening, beneath a sky brushed with stars, Kalen found himself playing a melody steeped in melancholy and hope. The air around them thrummed with energy, and spectral figures gathered silently, their translucent forms leaning into the music like moths to a flame. Mira stood watchful, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. They listen, she said quietly, and so do others. Kellen's fingers trembled on the bone flute. Others. There are those who worship the shrouded god, Mira explained, voice low and urgent. They will come for the flute. They hunger for the power you hold. The desert's vast silence felt suddenly fragile. A thin thread stretched taut between the living and the dead. Kaelin met Myra's gaze, a resolve hardening within him. Then we faced them together. A fierce wind rose, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant thunder. Shadows deepened on the horizon, and the desert's ancient song swelled, a melody of warning, of power, and of the fragile hope that even in the vastest loneliness, connection could be found. Their journey was just beginning. The desert had never seemed so alive or so dangerous. The sun, a fierce orb blazing behind a thin veil of heat, had just begun its slow descent when the first winds stirred the sands. Kaelin tightened his cloak around his lean frame, the coarse fabric rough against his weathered skin. His fingers brushed absently over the bone flute at his side, the curious artifact that had become both a burden and a beacon in his solitary journey. The wind grew stronger, a sudden and fierce sandstorm brewing on the horizon with an ominous roar. Kellen's heart quickened as the swirling grains whipped around him, stinging like 1,000 tiny knives. He sought shelter behind a jagged outcrop of sun-baked rock, the air thick with dust and the scent of dry earth. Mira was already at his side, her sharp eyes narrowing against the storm's fury, her hand resting protectively on the curved dagger at her belt. "This storm came too quickly," she said, voice steady but edged with concern. "The desert doesn't stir without reason." Kaelin nodded, his gaze fixed on the bone flute nestled in his palm. Since he had unearthed it beneath the shifting dunes, the instrument had whispered to him in dreams and visions, melodies of a time when gods had ruled over the endless sands. Now, faced with the storm's wrath, he felt an urgent compulsion to play. Raising the flute to his lips, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the desert's breath mingle with his own. The first notes slipped into the storm like a fragile thread, tentative and trembling. But as the melody grew, it wove through the howling winds, a haunting song that seemed to bind the tempest itself. The bone flute's voice was unlike any music Kaelin had ever played, ancient and mournful, carrying the weight of forgotten power. Then, from the swirling sands, ghostly shapes began to coalesce. Pale forms shimmered with a soft, ethereal light, faces marked by sorrow, and stories long buried beneath the desert's shifting dunes. They drifted around Kaelin and Mira, silent witnesses to the melody that stirred their restless souls. Kellen's heart pounded. The spirits were not malevolent, but their presence was overwhelming. Their mournful whispers carried on the storm's roar, spoke of ancient wars, lost gods, and a world where the boundary between life and death was thin and fragile. "Steady, Kaelin," Mira urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. She stepped closer, her dark eyes fierce beneath the storm-darkened sky. "You must control it. Don't let the music slip away." With trembling fingers, Kaelin tempered the melody, weaving a gentler tune that calmed the spirits. One by one, their faces softened, their whispers fading into the wind. The storm began to abate, the sands settling back into silence. But as quiet returned, distant voices echoed through the desert night, whispers of the bone flute's song and the summoner who dared to call forth the dead. Shadows moved beneath the dunes, figures cloaked in secrecy and driven by devotion to a shrouded god. Kaelin exchanged a wary glance with Myra. The desert's fragile balance had been disturbed, and the consequences of their actions were only beginning to reveal themselves. Yet beneath the weight of uncertainty, a strange hope lingered, that through melody, even forgotten power might find a new purpose. As the final notes faded into the twilight, Kaelin knew this was only the beginning. The desert's silence had been broken, and with it, the whispers beneath the dunes stirred to life once more. The desert sun hung high, relentless and scorching, as Kaelin trudged through the shifting dunes beside Myra. The bone flute rested heavily in his satchel, a silent reminder of the power and peril that shadowed their every step. Myra's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful, her fingers brushing the curved dagger at her hip. The air shimmered with heat, and the sands whispered secrets that only the wind seemed to understand. As they crested a ridge, a figure emerged like a mirage against the shimmering heat. Tall and lean, his silver hair caught the sun's glare, cascading around his shoulders in a halo of light that contrasted starkly with the faded desert robes draped loosely over his frame. A sly grin played on his lips, and his eyes gleamed with a mixture of amusement and calculation. Kalen slowed, instinct prickling at the back of his neck. "Who goes there?" Mira called, her voice steady but edged with caution. The stranger raised a hand in a casual salute, his grin widening. A friend, perhaps, or something close enough. "I am Elian. Have traveled these sands longer than most dare to remember." Myra's gaze narrowed, fingers tightening around the hilt of her dagger. "We have no need for company, especially from strangers who wander alone." Elian chuckled softly, the sound like dry leaves rustling. "And yet, here I am. Fate or folly. You decide. But before you dismiss me, know this, I possess knowledge that might prove useful." Kalen stepped forward, curiosity overcoming caution. "What knowledge?" "Songs," Elian replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ancient melodies that speak to the dead, to the gods buried beneath the sands. The flute you carry, it sings a dangerous song. I know its tune, the histories it unlocks, and the cult that thirsts for its voice." Myra exchanged a wary glance with Kalen. "Why should we trust you?" "Trust is a luxury in the desert," Elian said, eyes sparkling with mischief. "But consider me a guide through the shadows that follow you, or an obstacle should you choose to ignore my counsel." That night, beneath a sky smeared with stars, they gathered around a modest fire. Elian produced a small, worn instrument, fingers dancing over its strings to evoke a melody both haunting and hypnotic. The notes rose and fell like desert winds, weaving through the camp with an otherworldly grace. Kalen felt the music wrap around him, stirring memories and emotions long buried. Yet beneath the enchantment lay a subtle unease, a reminder that not all who sing such songs do so with pure intent. Myra watched Elian closely, her protective instincts flaring. "You speak of the cult. What do you know of them?" Elian's expression darkened. "More than I care to admit. I was once among them, before doubt and disillusionment set me free, or perhaps bound me to a different fate. They worship Azareth, the shrouded god, whose wrath sleeps beneath these sands. They seek to awaken him, to reclaim the power lost to time." Kellen's grip tightened on his flute. "And what of you? Are you truly free?" A shadow crossed Elian's face, a flicker of vulnerability masked by his sly grin. "Freedom is a song with many verses. I walk a path between light and shadow, ally and adversary, friend and foe." The tension thrummed in the air like the rising wind. Mira's voice broke the silence, steady yet firm. "If we are to survive what lies ahead, we must understand one another. But trust will be earned, not given." Elian nodded, the flames reflecting in his silver eyes. "Agreed. For now, I will walk with you. But know this, I have secrets that could save you or doom you. Choose your steps wisely." As the fire flickered and the desert night deepened, Kalen contemplated the fragile alliance forming beneath the endless sky. Elian's presence was a riddle wrapped in a melody, an enigma whose true song had yet to be revealed. The bone flute in his pack seemed to hum softly, as if sensing the shifting tides of fate. Tomorrow, the desert would hold new challenges, and the dance of trust and betrayal would begin in earnest. For now, the haunting music of the night carried them forward, a fragile thread binding three souls in a world where gods slept beneath the sand and the past, whispered in forgotten tunes. The journey was no longer theirs alone, and the desert's secrets grew deeper with every step. The desert night was a tapestry of stars, each pinprick of light a distant witness to the stories whispered through the ages. Around a modest fire that flickered against the vast darkness, Kalen sat cross-legged, the bone flute resting on his knees, its pale surface gleaming faintly. Before him, old Tarek's weathered face was illuminated by the flames, his eyes deep wells of memory and sorrow. Long ago, Tarek began, his voice rasping like dry leaves stirred by the wind. The gods walked among us. Their music shaped the world. Their power carved the very dunes beneath our feet. But such power breeds envy and hatred. Azareth, once a god of creation and destruction, sought dominion beyond his right. Kalen listened intently, the flute heavy in his hands, as Tarek's tale unfolded. The ancient war among the gods was a cacophony of clashing melodies and shattering silence. Thunderous chords tore the skies, while desolate harmonies wept across the earth. Azareth's fury was like a storm, consuming all in its path until the other gods, united by desperation, sealed him beneath the desert sands in a prison of silence and shadow. "The flute you carry," Tarek said, nodding toward the bone instrument, "is no mere relic. It is a key, a song that can unbind Azareth's cage. But such a song carries a price." Myra shifted beside Kalen, the firelight tracing the sharp lines of her face. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a piece of cloth, unfolding it carefully to reveal a faded tattoo on her wrist, a symbol carved in intricate patterns resembling swirling desert winds and ancient sigils. "I am of the Guardians," she said quietly, her voice steady but edged with resolve. "My ancestors swore to protect the sacred sites, to keep the balance between the mortal and the divine. The awakening of Azareth threatens more than just this desert. It threatens the fragile peace we all depend on." Kalen glanced at her, seeing the weight of that legacy etched in her dark eyes. He felt the bone flute grow heavier in his grasp, as if it absorbed the mounting gravity of their shared fate. From the shadows beyond the firelight, Elian leaned forward, silver hair shimmering under the moon's gaze. His sly grin was both a reassurance and a warning, and Kellen's gut twisted with uncertainty. Elian's knowledge of ancient songs and arcane magic was undeniable, yet his allegiance remained a shifting mirage. "The desert holds many secrets," Elian mused, voice smooth and enticing. "Some best left undisturbed, others waiting for the right melody to awaken them." Kalen met his gaze, searching for truth, but finding only the shimmer of hidden motives. The tension between trust and suspicion tightened like the desert's relentless heat. As the fire dwindled to embers, Kalen lifted the bone flute to his lips. A soft, melancholic note slipped into the night, weaving through the cool air and stirring the shadows at the edge of the camp. The melody was a lament for forgotten gods, a call to the past and a prayer for the future. In that moment, beneath the silent stars and endless sky, Kalen felt the desert's breath against his skin, a breath heavy with history, power, and peril. The path ahead was uncertain, but the song of the bone flute was clear. The past could not be unlearned, and the delicate balance of the desert depended on those brave enough to face its hidden lore. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Kalen rose, the flute cradled like a fragile promise. Beside him, Mira tightened the straps of her satchel, her gaze steely with purpose. Elian's silhouette lingered a moment longer before fading into the shimmering heat of the waking desert. The desert's ancient secrets were stirring, and the melody of destiny was only beginning to play. Kellen's fingers brushed the bone flute once more, a silent vow forming in his heart. Whatever trials awaited, he would face them with the haunting music of the past echoing in his soul. Outside the village, the sands shifted subtly, as if awakened by the stories told beneath the firelight. Somewhere deep beneath those dunes, the imprisoned gods stirred, his wrath and sorrow waiting to be sung back into the world. And Kalen held the song that could either save or doom them all. The desert was listening.